I've got this new gig. It's actually making a little bit of money. Recording essentially oral history with people's parents or grandparents or whatever. And it is just delightful. It is just delightful. Essentially, I'm talking to men for money. I talk to women for free, and I'm talking to these men. Men are paying me to talk to me. If you're interested at all, just shoot me an email. The simplest way to remember it is man, M-A-N, at manlistening.com. And I'll be happy to tell you more about it. It's a lot of fun.
We are their parents. We are in charge. We are outnumbered by these people, these children. So we have to sometimes say, like, you know, what's best for us in terms of leading this family.
What is the sound of one man listening? This is ManListening, a fresh podcast featuring the stories of strong women who bounce back. ManListening, because every woman deserves to be heard.
I met Laura Barnard because she was the marketing person for an upcoming podcast guest who is the winningest coach you've never heard of. And Laura Barnard is in marketing. And my friend who introduced us said, he's going to want to talk to you for the podcast. And sure enough, I did. Oh, my goodness. Fascinating story. Harvard undergrad, Chicago Business School, marketing. But one of the more interesting things is we get into it back and forth. She's married to a woman in New Hampshire. She's from Chicago. And we get into it about Chick-Fil-A. And this whole thing is me essentially trying to convert her, trying to flip this lesbian mom who's a branding marketing person to give Chick-fil-A a shot, which I'm not sure she should. I'm just saying. And she says she's going to go and engage in a conversation with the Chick-fil-A manager. You'll hear a lot of dumb, straight, white guy kinds of questions, but there's also some kind of interesting understandings along the way. My new friend, Laura Barnard. Where were you born?
I was born in Oak Lawn, Illinois.
Hospital or home?
Hospital.
For your mother, you're number what of how many?
For my mother, I am number 3 of 3.
You're the baby?
I am the baby.
And how much difference?
The baby.
No, there's only one baby.
I know. I'm fascinated by the baby.
To understand Laura, what should I know about your mother?
So my mother is very strong, like not like bodybuilder strong, like she's a mentally, emotionally strong person. She's very kind. She's doesn't take shit from anybody. But she's the nicest person you ever met. She did not have the opportunity to go pursue any sort of college education. So she very bright in school, academically talented, sang in the choir, sort of, not a sporty person, but involved. Met my dad at a really young age. They met when she was a freshman in high school and he was a sophomore. So they kind of pursued marriage, and
tell me that
she started working. So the story of how my mom and dad met, my brothers and I kind of don't really believe it because it's sort of those one too good to be true. And they are just so in love and they're attached at the hip that it kind of makes you sick, but it's so great, So they were in the lunchroom, and this is back in the 1960s, right? They were born in 1950 and 1951. So picture it, Chicago suburbs, public high school. My mom is in the lunchroom with her friends, doesn't know my dad yet. And just like a bored kid would just be sitting there, flipping a penny just to herself, just what kids do, fidgety things. She's flipping a penny. She accidentally flips it too far. It goes flying across the room and lands down my dad's shirt. And he pulls the penny out and he looks around and she's, beat red, like, oh my God, I just flipped my penny down this guy's shirt. And that's how they first met. And it was like love at first sight. And they've been together for over 50 years.
That is a kind of meet cute that you don't.
I mean, you can't make it up. And it's I was waiting, someday someone's gonna flip a penny down my shirt. And it didn't quite happen that way, but the idea that this is the person for me.
How did you meet your wife?
We met So it's very typical lesbian meetup story. We met through recreational sports.
Which
So we both
sport?
basketball. So we're both basketball players. Both played in college, and we were both living back in Chicago. That's my hometown, and she was there for work. And we both played in this weekend rec basketball league. And I showed up to the gym, and it was like an old beat up high school gym. Tie my shoelaces to jump into the next pickup game. And I swear to God, I just see her. And I said, like, I have to meet this person. Like I locked there's 50, 60 women there.
What was she wearing?
She was wearing, so she played at Wesleyan, which is a Wesleyan University of Connecticut. She was wearing like a grubby old Wesleyan jersey. I was like, oh, like Wesleyan, like thinking, oh, it's like, great school. She's a good player. Everyone seems to be gravitating towards her. And she was
So
cute. It was her eyes and her demeanor and her Wesleyan jersey. That sounds totally nerdy, but I'm like, oh, she's probably smart and good at basketball and
She
so
could have
romantic.
just had the jersey. She could have.
The jersey's disgusting, by the way.
It
wasn't the jersey.
Have it?
Yeah, I'll get it out. Whenever we play pickup basketball, like it's rare these days because we're old ladies at this point, but the jersey comes out and I'm always like kind of flashback to like the moment I saw her.
And so who asked who out? Who talked?
Oh, that's a very much debated question. So I think my side is correct, but
I'm asking you. This is the only version.
I set it up, like I first asked her to go out and she couldn't because she had a concussion. This was legit. This wasn't like a made up thing. So she had hit a concussion. She's like, I can't go out because I have this concussion. I can't go get a beer because I can't, drink, and I should, need to go home. But I said a rain check. I said, like, the next time. So I kind of positioned the rain check and then followed up on it. So
and
I did.
Did you knew she wasn't just putting you off?
I knew that. Yeah.
So she doesn't remember. What is her first memory?
That she basically was the one, like, hey, you're gonna take me out for that drink, right? Like she sort of like, she initiated it.
She was the She was the straw that turned the
exactly. Like someone had to like actually make the date happen, and she thinks she made it happen. I think I planted the seed for it to happen. Yes. So it will never be resolved unless you talk to her. But
you took advantage of a woman who was in a concussed state.
Exactly. I mean,
to go and buy her drinks. I mean,
that's not. I was 23 years old, so I was kind of an idiot. So
yeah,
I was a baby. I mean, I was young. I mean, we met. It was 2003. So I was a year and change out of college, and she's 4 years older. So she was clearly an older woman taking advantage of me. So I am the victim here, not the concussed Lindsay.
And where was the first date?
We went to, this is very fancy. If you know Chicago, it's called the Lion's Head Pub in Lincoln Park. It's the most bro-y bar with beer towers. And
is it bougie?
Gross. No, it's like an Irish pub. It's dark and full of frat boys and towers of beer.
It is not your lesbian bar.
No, it was not. We break the mold. We didn't really care where we hung out. It was near the gym.
Yeah. Well, that was wonderful. How long before you knew she's the one?
It was that night, the first night we hung out at Lion's Head Pub for 4 hours and just kept talking, and we just were like, it was sort of a done deal.
Both talking or one talking?
Both talking. I wasn't really a big talker until like she's just sort of like cracked the shell. I just was like, oh my God, I'm actually talking real conversations with this person. I was not a very open book to a lot of people until I met Lindsay.
Wow.
So it was like it was a life-changing, very long, and not, I'd say the beer tower thing kind of jokingly, it wasn't like an alcohol fueled conversation. It was like we just could have kept talking for like 24 hours straight, I think.
And so I'm wondering, was this your first serious relationship?
It was my first, yeah. My first serious relationship. I had dated guys in high school, like kind of on and off. Not I was more focused on myself in high school and even into college. It was school, sports, like total tunnel vision, where I didn't, and I had a lot of friends. So there wasn't it was like that part of my heart and my brain like wasn't fully developed yet, where I was like, oh, like relationships. And so it took, I think I was a late bloomer in that regard. I was very positively distracted by a lot of good things, and sort of put myself into those things and didn't really pay attention to the romantic side of things. So Lindsay was my first like really long-term, relationship, and my first relationship with a woman.
I have to ask the dumb, old, white,
well, yeah, you are. Well, I don't know.
Guy question. Did you always know that you were gay?
No, I always thought I was different, because I didn't, from a really early age. I remember, women in my extended family saying, Laura, like, why are you always playing sports? Why are you always wearing blue? Like, girls wear pink and bows and dresses. And I was always getting like in this like friction with anything that was expected of me in terms of genders, like, oh, like even with family traditions and just like the dress. And I was a huge sports nut, so like that was and it was not understandable by like my aunt or my grandma, like how you go out and like you should just sit and sit around and drink tea and wear dresses. So I always thought I was kind of different, and I don't like the word tomboy because I think its origins are kind of icky, and I don't associate that. But like if that for other people might understand it as that, which is fine. So I was different, and I also, I think I was open-minded too, because I had a lot of, especially as I entered college, a lot of my closest friends were gay. So it sort of was like, oh, like you can do that, you can be that, you can be who you are, and not have to sort of shut that piece of yourself off. So I kind of just like sort of cordoned off this part of me through high school, I think, and I kept it. And it's to sound weird, like kept it in a container. And then when I was in college, kind of opened my mind and just got, I grew up in a town in the Chicago area that's very conservative, very white, very straight, very homogenous, and didn't have any gay role models, if you will. Like it was not a thing. Like we weren't, there was maybe this second cousin twice removed or somewhere, like, oh, she's lesbian. Like, what's that? Like it was a new thing for me, frankly, when I got to college. And I was, it was kind of in college, I think it mentally switched to myself to say, I'm actually not interested in men, like, and that's okay. And I can like do everything under the sun that I ever wanted to do. It's not going to impede me in any way to be gay. It's going to actually be a superpower. So I flipped the switch, I think, in college, but didn't actually date anyone until post-college.
And so it sounds like you are of a generation and a place where that wasn't a problem at all.
No.
It was relatively easy for you to own
Yes.
who you were.
Yeah, it was. And there were, the whole coming out process, I'll say, and you plan it in your head, who you're going to tell first. And, you tell this person and they're going to tell that person, you sort of map this thing in your brain. And that was stressful. To an extent, and I had a pretty easy go of it. Let's say my parents were, loving and understanding, and my brothers ultimately came around after some initial challenging conversations of like, are you sure you're gay? And what if you change your mind? And are you sure, don't come out yet until you're sure. And just like, what do you, just kind of odd, challenging me conversations. And then on my wife's side, it was more difficult. I think some of her family members had a harder time at first, but everyone, flash forward now, and like everyone sort of came around, is on board, especially once we started having kids. But I had, from a professional standpoint, personal standpoint, family standpoint, I'm very fortunate. I had an easy easy go of it. And I know a lot of people don't, but I was always, supported. And I worked for companies that had gay and lesbian groups. They went as so far as to, extend partner benefits before they really changed their policies to include Lindsay. They paid for me to adopt when Lindsay had our first child, and it wasn't, we weren't married yet legally. Companies that go above and beyond to make you feel like, included, that was made a big difference.
Wow. You had kids before you were married.
And we had kids.
Kid.
Well, we got married. It wasn't legal in 2007 in Illinois. It was civil union. That was all you could. That was the maximum you could. That's all you could get. And we upgraded our civil union to a marriage license. So that, that's a second marriage, I guess you could call it, in 2012. And we had our first child in 2010.
And that was
got married. 07.
That was a surrogate, or your?
No, we had a sperm donation, and my wife carried, and it was her egg.
And how did you make the decision to do that as opposed to adopting, or like, why did you want to be parents?
Well, I think wasn't that first date that at the Lion's Head pub that I described. It was probably like the second date where Lindsay very quickly said, I'm not, I'm serious about our relationship. I want to have kids. If that scares you, tell me now, because that's really important to me. So she sort of voiced that very early on in a relationship. And I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gay yet. And you want to talk about having kids? Like, one of those, like, sort of accelerated my thinking and my beliefs, I guess, to sort of say, what do I want? My vision of my adult life was definitely having kids, whether it be my own kids or adopting kids or whatever, having a family, right? Having kids around. The conversation happened. It sort of quickly either, reconcile my own beliefs about it. I said, yes, I want to have kids too. And then it sort of, we were together, almost 7 years before we had kids. So we had plenty of time to figure out all the options. We had plenty of good times pre-kids. We got to get all out of our system. And the decision to adopt or carry, like physically carry a child, we kind of said, like, let's go the route where if we can have kids, like one of us, we have kids. If we can't, then we'll adopt. And I think the idea of, we end up using an anonymous sperm donor, so we don't actually know the donor. The sperm bank out in California, so I don't know if that's it was a personal decision to select an anonymous donor. Lindsay is 4 years older, so we said, okay, biological clock ticking wise, like, you should go first, right? That's just practical. She had a very, I'll say, easy, thankfully, successful first pregnancy, and it was kind of from there. Once we met this baby, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Wouldn't it be great if she had a sibling? And Lindsay was at that point the sure thing, so we put our money, on the sure thing, and did the same process again, and had another healthy, beautiful daughter. And then it was like, that was now 2012, our second child was born. So it's been like a whirlwind ever since. But once, I think, had we had issues with her getting pregnant, I would have tried to do it. And if I had issues, then we would have gone, the adoption route.
Were you in the labor and delivery?
Oh yeah. I was there.
How'd that go?
It's intense. I mean, it is the most intense experience. And I have a low threshold tolerance for pain. So I'm like about to pass out. I'm like feeling the pain, whatever. And Lindsay's like, you don't even know what this is. It was, and just to have the idea of like, it's a very, it's so hard on the birthing mother. It's in very many ways a life-threatening event for the mother. So here I am, like, loving and concerned about Lindsay, and then all of a sudden there's this another life on the line, and it's this intense period where you just want to get through it and have everyone be okay. So it was an amazing experience, and not for the faint of heart. Whew. There was one point, like, you have to I guess, and like we were there for a long time. The first pregnancy delivery took 24 hours or whatever, there for a long time. And you get hungry, I'm just kind of starving, and Lindsay's on the bed, like going through contractions, and she can't eat, and I'm sneaking a granola bar in the hospital room, and she's like, what are you doing? Like, how could you be eating at a time like this? I'm like, I need to sustain myself. This is intense. So it was, I was trying to be there for her, but I can only be witness. I can't even describe what that was like for her, but it was very intense.
And when you saw the child emerge,
Yes.
what was your reaction?
Just like I was so excited to meet her, and like we had picked out a name, and it's always that moment where like, does this name fit the kid? And I was like, this is Lulu. It was Lulu, and Lulu's her name. So it was like waiting to meet this person that you just couldn't wait to meet, and like I get to meet her, and it was like pure joy.
Wow.
It's awesome.
And so you all had 3?
We have 3 daughters. Isn't that crazy?
Is that by
So
design?
much
Can you dial that up?
I'd like to order 3, a large, medium, and small daughter, please.
Can you do it with a
it's
sperm
not
donor?
like a drive-through.
This guy only
You
produces.
can't just like order these things up. I guess there's more technology now that does enable some treatment of the sperm specimen where they like spin it a certain way where like the chromosomes move around where you have more likelihood of a boy or a girl. And I am not a doctor or a scientist, but I play one on TV. We did not do any of that. It just was like pure chance, which is crazy. 3 for 3 girls.
Did you want girls?
I wanted healthy kids. If I had to pick, I love girls. Like I think like to have daughters is so great. But either way would have been fine. But when we had 2 girls, I thought for sure the third would be a boy just to kind of balance us out. But then it was another girl, and I was like, all right, girls rule. Like we got this. And we're raising like this pack of what's like is it a pride? Is a group of lions? Like I think it's like this pride of like these little lions that we're raising, and it's really awesome. I would have felt bad for them if the third was a boy. This poor kid would have been like doomed by all these women. But to have this group of ladies is pretty awesome.
I've had women on this podcast who've been elected to public office straight up say women are better. They are more interested in consensus building. Is that a hardwiring thing, or is that a cultural thing?
That is not the question I thought you were going to ask when you started talking about gender, but this is an easy one compared to the gender one is a challenging topic. My belief and my personal bias is that women have the potential to be the best leaders. And I think it's a combination of hardwiring and culture, or nature and nurture, if you will. I describe it, or others have described it, and I sort of latch onto this idea of like, it's called relational leadership. And it's about caring for people. It's about communication. It's about customization, if you will, of like being able to, you have a team of people that you're leading, and it's not you at a podium saying, charge, let's run this way, like dictating or directing. You're actually going one-on-one and understanding each person's strengths and weaknesses and getting each person to buy into that common goal, and then sort of looking at this collective, relationally leading this group towards the objective. And I've seen women, and I look back at my career as an athlete and as a professional, and now as I'm working sort of one-on-one with a lot of women leaders, I think women are both hardwired and I think culturally supported to be that type of leader. I think it's underappreciated the impact that type of leadership can have, because it's not chest beating, Trump-esque, loudest voice in the room gets the attention, person at the podium gets the attention, like leadership style that gets sort of celebrated. It's the non-recognized, really impactful leadership that some organizations are benefiting from, and I see there's so much potential for this. It's like I think it's the future of leadership is female, or is non-gendered. How about that? Future of it. And I'm not saying women own that necessarily, but I think it's the ideal is that it's the ideal society and status of the world for me is gender free. There's no gender. It's just you are who you are. We're not going to get there, but I think for now to call it this female type of leadership, I think that's maybe what you're suggesting. If I'm not, correct me, but that the world is heading this way. The world needs this type of leadership.
Well, when you say customize, you and I have talked before.
Yeah.
It's when you can go into someone's office and say, cut the shit.
Right.
And when you need to say, it seems like you're struggling here.
Yep.
Tell me your
Right.
thinking.
Yeah. Right. And it's hard. I mean, for you to be able to like flip that switch or have that filter, go into those different modes, it takes energy. You have to care. You have to, it's not easy, right?
It's not a one size fits all.
No.
And
No.
when you say nature and nurture, what's the difference in being a mom and a dad?
They have two parents. We have two moms, but I don't think there's a difference. I think being a mom, what does this experience enable me to be or become, or how has it changed the way I think, act, behave? I think this is true if it's your mom or a dad. Being a parent makes you very quickly realize it's not all about you anymore. I described myself as this high school kid, like I was focused on being the best, doing my best, achieving school, sports, like me. It was and I was part of a family and I had friends and I wasn't, a loner, but it was, you really have to, your focus changes to really be about others when you're a parent. Because their very survival depends on it, right? So you wake up in the morning thinking, gosh, am I gonna, go for a walk first or have a cup of coffee first? No, you get up because the baby's awake and the baby needs to be fed. Or the baby has a dirty diaper, whatever. You go into the mode of care. So it's about being a parent flips the switch from being focused on self to you have to be focused on others. And I think like the softer side of like being a mom or being a dad or being a parent, I hope because it's this expansion of love. Like it's not, the amount of love you have to give is not a fixed pie, right? A child comes into your life and you hope that the love, it expands, right? And you love this kid. And so this idea of like being more nurturing, more caring, more loving, more sensitive to the needs of others, that softer side, I think both those like those are things that occur when you become a parent. I hope.
Okay.
I mean, they don't always. This is obviously
Right.
not. That's my Pollyanna version of being a parent.
Brass tacks.
Yeah.
Somebody says, we're not cooking tonight.
Yeah.
Let's go grab dinner.
Okay.
And then somebody else says, okay, where?
Yeah.
How long is the conversation after
well, we do like a quick, it's pretty quick. We're just, Lindsay and I are very decisive to each other. We sort of like can quickly, like we try to do what's best for most, family of 5. It's like, all right, well, if we go to the Thai food place, this will make 4 out of 5 of us happy. If we go get hamburgers, it'll make 3 out of 5 of us happy. If we go to sushi, only 2 of us will be happy. So let's go to the Thai place because like we haven't had it. So we have a quick like decision, not a matrix, but like we just kind of go through and like we make decisions quickly, kind of based on what's best for most in our family. But I'll also say, sorry, that sounds too. What I also think we've realized is like you brought this up, like feeling outnumbered or like this us versus them. We are their parents. We are in charge. We are outnumbered by these people, these children. So we have to sometimes say like, what's best for us in terms of leading this family is going to be best for everyone. So sometimes we have to piss some of the kids off or make them unhappy or make them do things they are not thrilled about doing because we think it's the best thing. Like moving, for example, moving back to Chicago. The kids are bawling their eyes out. Why are we moving? We love it here. We have a good life here. And we're like, yeah, we know, but this is best for your moms. This is best. And therefore what's good for us is going to be good for you guys. You just don't understand it yet. If we're happy and self-actualizing and around our friends and family and in a city that we love, that's diverse, they don't see that. They don't understand it, but like trust, we have to just we make those decisions that are best for us in the spirit of it being best for our family.
So what you're saying is women can make snap decisions. Like there's sometimes in which I have said, because I'm the dad, that's why, because we got to choose. Yeah. We can't just drive around aimlessly. We got to pick a place. It may be the wrong place. You guys can all blame me.
As long as it's not Chick-Fil-A. Anywhere but there.
I love
But
Chick-fil-A.
so you're saying, I know,
No,
we talked about last time, I can't eat there.
I mean, why
I'll
not?
catch on
I mean,
fire because they're
no,
homophobics. I can't support their brand.
there are gay people who eat at Chick-fil-A. I will introduce you to some, and they have not burst into flames.
It's a news breaking headline. Gay people
But
eat at
what
Chick-fil-A.
I mean, but what that tells me is that you pick places like you put your money where your mouth is. I mean, you're gonna support places that support your values, and you're not gonna support places that do not support your values.
I try as much as possible, yes, to do that.
It makes sense. Chick-fil-A communicates to its workers, I think, in a myriad of ways. You are not going to be a fry cook forever. And I don't think that McDonald's does that.
Really?
Yes. And I think it shows in the service that you get in a Chick-fil-A. That I can absolutely demonstrate this to you in side-by-side comparisons all over the country, that the service you receive in a Chick-fil-A is exponentially better than a McDonald's. It's quicker.
I wouldn't know. I've never been.
Yeah. Well, that's what.
But I'm curious about this because I have, I guess, a positive brand association with McDonald's in that it seeks to employ anyone and everyone who wants to work, who wants to, it seems like it's giving access to employment to a lot of people who wouldn't have it, and especially in the locations that they're in. But I would like to learn that about Chick-fil-A, maybe open my mind up. But I hear that that's a very positive thing that you're describing.
What if you went into a Chick-fil-A and said to a manager, and not in a fast, but what if you went in and actually said to a manager, who a lot of times you'll meet the owners in a Chick-fil-A, but the manager or the owner, what's up with you guys and gay people?
Yeah. I believe people get a second chance. I believe in forgiveness. This was also now, the controversy with anti-LGBTQ stuff, let's say, was now a couple years ago when it was most intense. So maybe I hope it's rearview mirror. I hope they've adapted new policies, and I would like to talk to them about, I would be totally down for that conversation to update my own beliefs, because I kind of negatively influenced me, a few years back, and I sort of shut them they're off my list, so to speak. But that would be a good conversation. I would learn something. And I would have a delicious sandwich at the end of the conversation. Sounds pretty good.
You might just have a cup of water and a good conversation and never go back.
But I believe that the brand, and just like people, brands, companies, they can evolve and change and update their beliefs and operating systems. And I should have it in more open mind.
One thing that bugs me, it's a pet peeve, is when people say, well, this is my personal brand. And I'm like, what a load of shit, like my brand. But particularly when their name is the brand,
right?
Like the name is the brand, they attach their name, and I think they have a hard time down the road. Talk to me about that, because as a branding expert.
My business is generally described as a personal branding agency. So, but when there's a way that I work with my clients, and the way that I understand personal branding, where it doesn't make me cringe, and it doesn't feel so superficial. So what is a personal brand, as soon as I'm defining that, or describing that? So imagine there's things that what you say and what you do, how people feel about that, where those things meet, like this Venn diagram place where those things meet. So what you say and what you do, and how that makes people feel, that's how you're perceived. That is your brand.
Well, those are three things. what you
Yes.
say, what you do.
I kind of put those together though.
They're not always together because
they should be.
With people that say one thing
So
and do
my job is to align. When these things are aligned, what you say and what you do, if there's consistency to those things. So you're right, they're separate, but in theory and in the perfect world, they should be aligned.
Well, the world is filled with men who say, "Hey, I'm a dick. What are you going to do? You know, you love me or you hate me. I'm just a dick."
And if they're perceived as a dick, then that's their brand.
Right.
If they make people feel like, oh, that guy's a dick, and they say and they do things that are dick-like, that's their brand. Guess what? You're a dick.
But
which is fine. I don't work with those people.
Oh, but what they say is, "Oh, I'm a lovable rogue."
Okay.
No, you're just a rogue.
So you can say these things, you can say you are, but if people don't perceive you as such, you are not.
Oh.
It's all about it doesn't matter what you think or what you say or what you do, it's how others perceive that. So you have to have some awareness of others. You have to have an understanding of, understand your audience, so to speak. It's not about you, it's about others' perception of you.
So, like, have you ever bumped into people where it's like, they are such great people, they have such a great product, service, message, they're on point in every way, they get no business, they get no love. What the hell is the disconnect?
So there's a couple things, and again, it's all about, in this, the consumer or the audience, I'll say. So if it's a restaurant, there's a consumer of the food. You have to be relevant to the consumer, and they have to be aware of you. So awareness and relevance, those are brand marketing terms.
What does relevant mean?
That it's has meaning or utility to me, so the consumer. So and Italian food is a good example. Like, if I only, if I eat an all raw seafood diet and all I eat is sushi, Italian food is not relevant to me. It doesn't have meaning, utility, purpose for me. So to try to connect that brand, that restaurant brand, with someone who's a raw sushi lover, eater only, it doesn't make sense. You have to find the audience where your brand, your offering is most relevant, and then you have to amplify your message to be aware, so they can see you, they can hear you, they can find you. You have to be as accessible and easy for them to find as possible. So get a bigger megaphone, amplify that message out to that audience where your product offering is relevant.
Fishing in different ponds, start going where the fish are, I guess.
Sure. But if you're not and it's the same thing in my business, if you're not being seen and being heard, you don't exist. So you can be the most wonderful, take this example, like this amazing mom and pop, best spaghetti ever, like best menu, best restaurant experience, and if no one sees or hears of this, it's going to be very challenging unless you're running, a very niche boutique little, 4 tabletop exclusive restaurant. Like that's probably not the business that they're in. But it's the same thing with personal brands. If you have great thoughts, you have a great concept, you have great ideas, and no one can see you or hear you, and you're not out there, you're not putting yourself out there, no one knows how to relate to you. You cannot possibly be relevant to them. They don't know you, and they have to know you to work with you, to consider you, to hire you, to promote you, to collaborate with you. If you're not seen and not heard, they don't know you, and if you're not known, you can't be worked with, essentially.
It may be that there are no gay-friendly Chick-fil-A's out there.
True. Let's just go back.
I don't want to sell you on something that's not true. I don't know. It may be that they are. It may be that you shouldn't give them $1.
I live in a part of the country where there. I don't even think there's a Chick-fil-A within 50 miles. Maybe in Boston there's one, but New England has a.
Well, there are other restaurant chains that are that way.
Yeah.
They don't do. They're very much regional. Yeah. It's a cultural kind of a thing. What is the Lesbian Brand and what does America have wrong about it? Like, what do homophobes have wrong about, especially lesbian moms? So what do you tell people who would go, oh, they're never going to know at the daddy-daughter dance, what are they
Right.
going to do?
Ooh,
So what do you
yeah.
tell those? How do you address that? What do you
So it's funny, the school, before we moved to New Hampshire, our Chicago public school, they used to have a daddy-daughter dance, and you know, either by some suggestion by my wife and others, that it was called the family dance. So they updated their branding of the daddy-daughter dance, but not just for the lesbian moms, but for the kids who have, you know, one mom, or who have lived with their grandma, or, you know, don't have a dad around. So in general, I think there's some antiquated like constructs out there, like the daddy-daughter dance in a public school, for example, that probably just need to be updated to be more inclusive, period, for not just for lesbians, but for all families. So there's a lot of like simple things that schools and organizations and places can do so that doesn't become like a thing where it's like, oh, can we not go to the dance, and our daughter's not, her friends are talking about going to this thing and she can't go because she doesn't have a dad. Like, let's just remove that thinking from the scenario by upgrading these things. But the brand, I think, like the idea that like lesbian moms are different from two gay dads, or different from a mom and a dad versus, you know, any sort of family configuration, single parent, non-birth parent, whatever it is. Like, I'm eager to seek the common ground, the commonality of like, and this is not to be cheesy, but like love, then parse out the differences. And even by, you know, the stereotype might be like, oh, lesbians are anti-men and they're all, you know, raging feminists, and they're like gonna raise these she-wolves that are gonna go like perpetuate these myths in the world. And it's like, no, I don't.
Gonna go castrate.
Exactly. So I mean, I actually kind of like that idea, but not. But like, I just say like, let's elevate to the commonplace of like parents, and like whatever fill in the blank type of parent you are, like that. If you just anchor yourselves in like love and nurture and support, and like just, you know, versus harping on the differences. But so I didn't answer your question, but I don't know. The lesbian mom brand is, I think, like, to have two moms is like the luckiest situation for a kid, personally. And like our daughters complain about having to make 2 Mother's Day cards on Mother's Day. That's like the hardest part about having 2 moms. So that sounds like a pretty good life to me.
Is there a time when you consciously or unconsciously say to yourself or to your spouse, we're going to bring the dad energy to this blank? And if so,
Never.
Never.
Not once. I mean, I'm not being flippant. Like, never once has that come into our.
Well, we haven't spoken a word about your father. Was there an energy? Did he bring an energy? Did you get along with that guy?
I got along with, yeah, of course. My dad, I mean, he was attached at the hip to my mom, who's the best. Now my dad is the consummate salesman, very likable, gregarious, funny. He's runs a restaurant, so I can imagine that mom and pop restaurant business. My mom and pop are mom and pop restaurateurs, so and they run a
what kind of
pizza restaurant. So they have a pizza place in the suburbs of Chicago, and they're franchisees, and they have a franchise also in Naples, Florida. It's called Aurelio's Pizza, and it's amazing.
So did they?
And I want some now.
Did they create the brand?
No, they are franchisees. The brand is a Chicago-based brand that they grew up with the family that founded it, that started it.
Do they still use the family recipe?
Yes.
And deep dish?
So you know, shockingly, Chicago pizza doesn't always mean it's deep dish. It's actually thin crust Chicago pizza.
I don't. And now you're just saying words. I don't know.
Well,
I've never heard of that.
I know everyone assumes that Chicago's deep dish. There is actually a great thin crust. So it's sweeter sauce. There's actually there may be some sugar added to the sauce. I don't know. I only worked there for a minute. Sweet sauce, salty cheese blend that caramelizes when you
Oh my
cook it,
God.
and a
Oh my
crust
God.
that's not like, like a New York pizza has like a puffy sort of bagel-like crust. This is more of like a denser, crispier crust, and not a cracker crust though. It's like in between. So it's like, get its own sort of, the dough has to sit overnight. It's
Oh
very
my
exciting.
God. I want to come to
It is. I mean,
I wanna
I'm
come.
like, my stomach's growling talking about it. It's really good. So, but my parents run this restaurant. They own the they own the franchise. They're franchisees. So my dad's like like the guy, the consummate host, the consummate salesman who comes in, makes you feel welcome. Great sense of humor. I'm glad to have been raised by my parents, but I think about my kids having two moms. I go back to that. I'm like, that we're all in all the time with these guys.
Which do you think you're more likely to hear? Oh, I'm not going to that restaurant because they're homophobic or they're anti-gay, or, well, I can't go to that restaurant. It's run by a couple of gay guys, or it's run by a couple of lesbians. Which do you think is more?
That's a good. So
which is more common, do you think?
I
now,
bet
with,
it's.
with bars, we got to take bars out of it, because
Yeah, I mean, and this is part of like living, having lived going to college in Boston, growing up in Chicago, moving back to Chicago as an adult, and now living in this like New Hampshire. I guess it's kind of a bubble, but like we don't go out much into the wilderness, so to speak, of places where it would be a problem to have a lesbian or gay owned restaurant. So like in my mind, I'm like, who would ever say that? But I'm like, there's probably half the country that would say that. So unfortunately, I have maybe less, maybe 40%.
Has there ever been a case where you work on a project or whatever, and then somebody goes, oh, you're married to a woman? I didn't know that. And like, what are the varieties of responses when you say, hey, yeah, I got 3 kids. My wife and I have 3 kids. What are the varieties of give me a little spectrum.
So I'll tell you, there's been there's been an evolution over the years. So now, go back to 2003, it's now almost 20 years ago. I inflate a little bit, but it's gotten better where it's less of like a shock to someone. And I'll say in most situations, either I consciously or subconsciously do it. I preempt. I'll talk about my wife, or I'll talk about being gay sort of preemptively, so that it's not like a discovery, shock, surprise for the person. Like, oh, like I want to set them up for success, if it makes sense. Like, and not have a totally awkward, like, oh, like, wait, you're a lesbian? Like, so I just say, I talk about my wife, or, but I go back to my first real job, like out of went to business school, and like the first like real official job I had, and the head of the company, we were out at an offsite event in Las Vegas, which probably doesn't bode well for the story, but it was somehow someone had told him, and this is before I was married to Lindsay, but that I was lesbian, and like he like sort of comes up next to me. We're at this crowded, bar, restaurant, whatever it was. And he's like, gestures towards, a group of girls. Like, he's like, so are you into that? Like, am I into that? Like, checking out these girls with him. And I'm like, there's so many things wrong with this. But he was like, all of a sudden I was one of the guys to him, which was very strange. And also like, ew, this is how guys talk to each other. Like, oh my God. So, and then it, much more benign instances after that, but that was sort of the first, like, oh God. It was like a weird, he was so okay with it that he was too comfortable and acted like totally inappropriate about it. Like I was just treating me as one of the guys.
Have you ever been to a strip bar?
Oh yeah.
And
same situation where it's like, oh, you're like with coworkers. Like, because that was
invited you out, or that.
And we went out for dinner and drinks, and all of a sudden the limo cab is like stopping at whatever place. I'm like, where are we? And like, okay, I'm like, can't go out on the sidewalk and walk home from here. So like, not that I, not to make it out, I was like, I couldn't leave, but like, I would find myself in after work social situations where it's like, oh, like, you're one of the guys.
And looking at
Not
it
that I
sort of
am-
like an anthropologist,
Right.
when you're not like watching some depiction on TV, you're actually
Right.
at a strip club. What was your like visceral response?
Well, most this is stereotypical, but I have heard that a lot of people who work in strip clubs are lesbians.
Right.
So I'm thinking like, good for her. Like she's making a shit ton of money, and like, yes, it's completely exploiting women and women's bodies. But if it's done, like if it's safe for them and they're making a ton of money, and these ding dong asshole guys are throwing like $20 bills at them, and they get to go home, and like the next day they go be a nurse or teach or run their business, whatever. I don't know what they do during the daytime.
Raise their kids.
Exactly. These are so I'm just like, I'm there more like, not like, yeah, this is great. More like, this is a very, not my choice, but these women are making a choice to work there. They're making money. A certain percentage of them are lesbians. So like, was a very disturbing experience, I'll say, but I also was like, it was like an anthropologist, like this is how these guys think. This is fun for them. Like just understanding that mentality, for better, for worse. Like I've been there.
Did you think this is how these guys think, or did you think this is how guys think?
And again, it's a broad brushstroke. I'm like, this is kind of guys think about sex a lot.
So you think that, and I don't know if it's true or not.
And objectify women a lot.
What does that mean? I hear that term a lot, but what do you mean by that?
That women are a thing to look at, and like they're not, like, they're objects, not people. Like objects to be used for their enjoyment, their pleasure, their purposes, not people that are operating out of their own free will and volition and like their choice.
Like, it strikes me that you and Hooters would probably not be a good fit.
Shockingly. Although I do love wings, so it's really hard for me, but I love a nice buffalo wing,
I feel like I gave you a hard time.
Why?
At certain times I was,
Oh,
but
never.
I admire
I have two older brothers. Remember that.
I admire you so much. I'm better than they are, by the way.
Probably.
But I admire you so much, and I love talking, and we could talk all day, and thank you for doing this. And
Thank you.
I hope we get to work together again.
I look forward to it. I'm on this. I'll just be hanging out in the Zoom waiting for you. So
Just stay on this call.
I'm gonna just hang out and get cozy in here. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate you.
Laura and I had some more conversations offline about B corporations, socially beneficial corporations, about environmental responsibility, about social responsibility and conscience, about the governance of these corporations and responsibility to employees and all stakeholders, which got a little bit in the weeds. I don't think that our conversation is over. I think, and I hope, we can work together in the future. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate you indulging my questions. Thanks so much.
ManListening is a production of Unmediated LLC in cooperation with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. Allison Andrews at Andrews Creative and Rachel Clapp-Miller are developmental producers. Sally Higgins at Higgins & Owens tries to keep us legal. Our music is A Day at the Park by the group Pictures of the Floating World. Your announcer is Catherine Smith. That's me. Please go to our Patreon page. You'll find us at patreon.com. Look for ManListening, one word, no spaces. We hope you'll join us by becoming a member. A small investment can raise up the conversation. If you want exclusive member merch like a t-shirt, we can arrange that too.
Thank you to absolutely everyone who has supported ManListening from the very beginning. I really appreciate it. It's personally meaningful to me, and I personally thank you.
Don't forget to support us at Patreon. We believe one voice can change the conversation. Click the subscribe button, and next week you'll hear.
There were some takeaways from being part of Harvard basketball. So all these women that have these incredible careers say, well, I learned this by being a basketball player at Harvard.
That's next week on ManListening. Thanks.